Welcome to Speaking of Higher Ed, Conversations on Teaching and Learning. This podcast is produced by the Center for Instructional Innovation at Augusta University. I'm your host, Andrew Everett. The purpose of this podcast is to create a resource that will help you create engaging and meaningful learning experiences. This is episode 19 and our Summer Shorts episode for July, where we will quickly recap some key moments from the past year. In this episode, we will cover using AI in higher education, the ungrading approach, and share tips for preparing for a successful semester. Please share this episode and subscribe. New episodes will be back the third Wednesday of each month in spring and fall semesters. In episode 13, JoAnn Edmond, Director of Instructional Innovation, and Jenn Rose, Faculty and Instructional Developer in the Center for Instructional Innovation here at Augusta University, share their insights to help faculty enhance their teaching practices. One of the tips they emphasize is creating a learner-centered syllabus.
We at CII have created some tools and job aids to help with this task, and one of which is a syllabus template, which is a Word document you can download. So if, for example, if you've never created a course syllabus before, that is one tool that you could use to walk you through the process. But overall, I think it's really important to embrace a learner-centered mindset when it comes to creating tools like a syllabus, which essentially can serve as a blueprint for your course. And I think it's kind of an unspoken assumption, I would say, with, for example, Brightspace, our learning management system. The folks who create that sort of assume that those who teach online or use online courses for whatever purpose in their deliveries, they'll have some sort of blueprint going into the actual task of constructing a course. So a syllabus, especially a learner-centered or learner-focused syllabus, can be really helpful for students, especially when we think about institutionally our goals of improving student retention, things like that. Creating a learner-focused or learner-centered syllabus is one step or one tool, one teaching technique that our faculty can use to really help our students and directly support the institutional goal of improving learner retention.
One thing that Jenn did bring up is all about the students. It's that centered on the students. And by having a syllabus there, just the simple act of putting a syllabus into D2L, it will start building that community that you want for your learners to be in.
Our discussion also covers strategies for providing timely, meaningful feedback using LMS features such as replace strings for personalized messages and rubrics to clarify grading criteria and streamline the process. To hear this full episode, click on episode 13 on our show page at augusta.edu/innovation. In episode 17, Augusta University's Dr. Candis Bond, Director of the Center for Writing Excellence and Associate Professor of English, and Dr. Trent Kays, Director of College Composition and Assistant Professor of English, join us to discuss an approach to grading that shifts the focus from traditional grades to student autonomy and learning. This approach is often called ungrading. It emphasizes the importance of mistakes, continuous feedback, and revisions in the learning process.
So typically I think of ungrading as an assessment and evaluation approach or philosophy that kind of favors process more than anything. It favors kind of formative assessment, kind of learning in the process. It does not value traditional grading, that A through F scale, in any way. Matter of fact, it exists kind of specifically to go against it. And it tends to value really good verbal and written feedback more than a standard sort of percentage or grade or something of that nature.
All right. Dr. Bond, do you have anything to add or a different perspective?
No, I agree with everything that Trent said. I think it's a mindset. It's a philosophy. It's not necessarily a specific strategy or practice. There are lots of different, strategies and practices you can employ if you are operating within an ungrading framework, I guess. And in my mind, it just it helps you undistract students from having the emphasis on a grade. I think especially at Augusta University, we tend to recruit students who are very high achieving, who have very specific goals for what they want to do. And that means that sometimes they can be very grade focused. But within an ungrading framework, like Trent said, you're really kind of focusing more on intrinsic motivation. You're focusing more on the learning process and focusing less on extrinsic extrinsic motivators and the letter grade. I do tell my students at the beginning, I don't talk with them about ungrading, but I do always tell them, I wish I didn't have to grade you. So in class, like, let's think about what it would look like if grades didn't exist. And let me show you all the ways I've tried to design the course to where we're not thinking about grades as much. Like, we do have that conversation, but we do a lot of process reflections for things that they compose. And those process reflections ask them questions about their intentions. And I try to definitely take intentions into account when I do finally assign a grade, whatever form that ends up taking.
This approach may promote equity, increase student motivation, and enhance learning outcomes. Drs. Bond and Kays shared their experiences with ungrading in their courses at Augusta University. Hear more by clicking on episode 17 on our show page. And let us know if you're using ungrading by joining the conversation at facebook.com/AUGCII. Dr. David Joyner was our guest in episode 15. Dr. Joyner is the Executive Director of Online Education and the Online Master of Science in Computer Science at the College of Computing at Georgia Tech. He discusses the impact of AI on education for both students and educators. He shares his insights from his research and classroom experiences, focusing on the transformative potential of tools like ChatGPT. Dr. Joyner addresses how you can incorporate AI into your teaching to enhance learning and adapt assessments to maintain rigor.
Many of the initial adjustments we have to make are really on the assessment side, that there are certain changes we have to make in order to keep our assessments reliable and effective demonstrations of student understanding. Because if we don't, we'll see, a large amount of AI-generated content submitted as if the student did it themselves. And so some of those changes, they've taken on different forms. There's different ways we can do it. I've seen some classes go to more proctored assessments and more timed assessments and more closed-ended assessments, which admittedly I've done a little bit of as well in one of my classes where we added something like that, because it's a class that really strongly lends itself to a lot of AI assistance. So we felt that was necessary to add as kind of another little piece of the puzzle. It's never the case that we want to throw out everything else we were doing, but it's created a need to have an additional little reassurance that students know some stuff from the depths of their own mind, as opposed to stuff they can just do with some AI assistance. But we've seen the other end of the spectrum as well, that there's this idea, if we borrow from the calculator analogy of, this is kind of a calculator for writing and for thought. And calculators enabled us in math classes to solve harder problems, to do more practice problems, to do more faster, and as a result, develop a better understanding quicker. I've seen classes that have done some new, more open-ended assessments, because if you're not yet familiar with this language or this concept or this historical figure or whatever, we now can expect you to get up to speed faster because you have this new tool. And so we can expect you to do more as a result. One of my other classes, I think, has had the most fascinating experience with it because it's a very open-ended project-based class. And we basically tell students, your project should represent 100 hours of work and it should be an authentic contribution to the field. That class hasn't changed at all, because what you can do in 100 hours is still, 100 hours of work. It's still a good project. But what you can do in 100 hours now has gotten to be a bigger project, a more ambitious project, because you have access to this. So I think there's kind of these two kinds of sides of it. There's the side where we have to adjust some things, because if we don't, we might see students doing the GPT equivalent of just using a calculator for their entire homework assignment. But on the other end, we can adjust what we expect them to do to raise our expectations and to actually ask them to use it effectively and to use it to reach higher heights and better understanding than they could by themselves.
Dr. Joyner also discusses how he has seen students use AI in his courses, and he introduces his new publication, A Teacher's Guide to Conversational AI, as well as a professional certificate program he developed, which is available on the edX platform. Click on episode 15 to hear the full episode and find links to those resources. All the resources we discussed today, along with the full episodes, are available on our show page at augusta.edu/innovation. Thank you for listening. Please take a moment to rate, review, subscribe, and share. Speaking of higher ed, This podcast is produced by the Center for Instructional Innovation at Augusta University.